Fuck around, make my 40 pop. No popcorn, I pop pistols, reaming my body.
Alright guys, Boruto episode 287 review. This episode right here was essentially the first episode that the manga adaptation actually started in the anime, and it was absolutely impeccable. Code's entrance was essentially what I thought it was going to be. One of the things that I've kind of been saying is that as soon as the Boruto anime actually does start to adapt the Boruto manga, it's going to come in hot, and it definitely came in hot. We got to see Code, not only his actual introduction or his reintroduction, we got to see his white karma seal, we got to see him actually fighting against people to actually show us what his skill set actually is. Not only that, Eida was also unlocked. We got to see a sighting of Otsutsuki, and just a bunch of stuff did actually go down. But first things first, I do want to talk about what we did see and hear from Otsutsuki and also the Otsutsuki god. Otsutsuki was basically telling Code to actually go from planet to planet, absorbing the life on that planet via creating the god tree and actually eating the chocolate fruit. That right there essentially laid out Code's actual plan. Now in this particular episode right here, Code didn't necessarily talk much about revenge as it did in the Boruto manga, and I personally believe it's still going to be a very heavy motive for what Code actually does want to do. But in this particular scene, they crystallized what the Otsutsuki will actually is, and did actually show us a very cool image of the Otsutsuki god. One of the things I do have to point out about the Otsutsuki god, it doesn't really seem like it has a Jogan, which is very different from what we did actually get to see in the Boruto manga. But it's also a possibility, because this scene did actually come out years ago, that they may actually opt to change whatever dojutsu that it is surrounding the Otsutsuki god. Maybe it ends up being Ishiki Otsutsuki's dojutsu for all we know. But after Ishiki Otsutsuki essentially told Code to essentially carry out the Otsutsuki will, he made a beeline to Eida and of course tried to unseal her, which is where we got the absolutely insane scene with Code. Now first things first, he confronted some guards. Let's be honest, we all understood that they were going to be fodder. They didn't necessarily do anything. These are all things that we did actually get to see in the Boruto manga. However, the new guy is basically built like the Liver King. He came out and even took even more steroids, which is like insane, and that right there is to essentially crystallize and make us understand that this guy is actually no joke. This guy right here can actually do something or actually push Code to some sort of limit. That wasn't the case at all either, because Code absolutely destroyed this guy, and this right here was actually being paired with Kawaki essentially describing how Code is, essentially saying that Code isn't necessarily like a regular guy. He himself was originally stronger than Jigen, surpassed Jigen, the guy who actually made Naruto and Sasuke look like absolute children and basically sent Sasuke home crying to his wife. He's basically saying that Code is stronger than him, and Kawaki did also point out the fact that he was actually scaled down, so he's not necessarily at that level, which later on in the episode, I'm pretty sure all the manga readers understand this. Amato's essentially saying that he wants to free Eida to actually lift those limiters to now become stronger than Jigen. But even without lifting the limiters, he basically made quick work of the Liver King. One of the interesting abilities that we did actually get to see from Code was the claw marks. It was essentially introduced very early on in the episode, basically detailing that there were 4 claw marks around the Hidden Leaf Village, and from this fight right here, it looks like Code is very easily able to actually maneuver from one claw mark to another claw mark. Even in this episode, Shikamaru kind of compared to Minato's flying Raijin, which is how he can like instantaneously go from one place on the planet to a completely different other place on the planet. It might even extend to different dimensions. We didn't necessarily get to see that from Minato as of yet. Hopefully he comes back, but you never know. But on top of that ability, he also has flat out impeccable taijutsu. Again, the Liver King guy was essentially basically mimicking someone that's supposed to be strong and fast. Even Code kind of mentioned that the guy was very light on his feet, but he couldn't really touch Code. Not only that, Code's defensive abilities were absolutely on play from the rip. When he was walking in versus the guards, he didn't even flinch when they were firing off the chakra guns. And not only that, this big strong guy got his punch stopped immediately. And not only that, of course, Code finishes the guy off with his signature claw mark. So this guy is definitely going to be a dilemma. Now, one of the differences that I definitely did want to see from Code from the manga to the anime is how they actually portrayed Code. As of right now, everything is looking absolutely impeccable. I think that as of right now, this right here is essentially what we kind of thought that Code was going to be when we knew absolutely nothing about him. Remind you guys, Code originally was like the very quiet Kata member, and we kind of all assumed that he'd essentially be one of the strongest characters in the Kata organization. And from this right here, that's essentially what we're seeing. Boruto and Kawaki in this particular episode, they didn't necessarily do much but kind of narrate kind of what was going on, but also did kind of give us their plans moving forward. They do understand that Code is this very strong villain and is possibly a threat to the Hidden Leaf Village, but one of the things that I definitely did like about them at this particular point in time is that they realize that Naruto and Sasuke aren't always going to be around to bail them out in every single situation. So now they're kind of taking it upon themselves to actually improve and to actually be the ones to potentially save the Hidden Leaf Village, which is absolutely impeccable. One thing that I definitely do have to point out, Amato did actually say that Cold wasn't necessarily going to attack the Hidden Leaf Village at his current power level. So even though we think that Cold is like this extremely strong guy, and we kind of know that he is this extremely strong guy because he was kind of bullying Boro back in the day, and we understand how strong Boro was, but even though he's that strong, he understands that he is not strong enough to take on Naruto and Sasuke even at their current nerf levels, plus a Kawaki and Boruto. Heavily on the Boruto though, however, minimum, because we do understand if Momoshiki takes over Boruto, he's essentially an Otsutsuki level ninja. Amato and Shikamaru in this episode, they had some dialogue in this episode, and I'm pretty sure you guys know my stance on Amato. I think Amato's a good guy, man. I think that Amato is doing a lot of good stuff for the Hidden Leaf Village, and even though I do think that he possibly has some ulterior motives, I don't necessarily think it's going to be completely counterintuitive to what the Hidden Leaf Village actually does want to do. I know that right there is like me going out on a limb, but because no one thinks that Amato's a good guy, I'm gonna be the one guy that thinks Amato's a good guy. But he did have some interaction with Shikamaru that kind of made it clear what Amato actually likes to do, and what we've essentially been seeing for a very long time in the series is basically the fact that he loves to withhold information. This right here is going to be a common theme, not only throughout this episode, but throughout this whole entire arc. Bro has been withholding a bunch of information, but even past that, essentially he's withholding information to basically give him the upper hand in certain situations and not necessarily revealing everything, mainly because it would kind of put him at a disadvantage. He understands that he kind of needs to be helpful, or the Hidden Leaf Village doesn't necessarily have a use or a need for him, which is why I personally believe that he's kind of trickling out information. But not only that, he's kind of trickling out information to kind of hide specifically what his own agendas are. Now, even though I did kind of say that Amato is possibly going to be a very good guy and is going to help out the Hidden Leaf Village, I still do believe that he does have some sort of ulterior motives, but it's not necessarily going to be completely dangerous to what the Hidden Leaf Village actually does want to do. Another thing in this episode, Eida, at the very end, and of course we're not necessarily going to know this too much, but in this right is going to be a bit of spoilers, but I have to talk about it, because Eida's eyes were completely blaring at this particular episode. But we essentially got to see the first look of the Senringan in the actual anime. This right here is going to be an ability that essentially was kind of explained in this particular episode, where she essentially knows everything and kind of also sees everything, but also on top of that, she has a completely other OP ability, which is kind of explained in this particular episode, where Code can't actually attack her. Another slight thing that I definitely did want to point out that was kind of in there, like as a surprise, we did see something that Amato was working on. Now, we don't necessarily know specifically what it is, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the manga readers could possibly guess what this thing right here could possibly be. Spoilers wise, I'm probably going to talk about the anime a lot more in depth throughout the week, because during my reviews I kind of want to keep it non-spoiler heavy, so I'm just going to leave that right there. But let me know what you guys think about this episode down in the comment section below. In my personal opinion, I think that this right here was definitely a very, very good intro episode. As I said a bit earlier, as soon as they were going to start adapting the Boruto manga, they were going to be coming in hot, and that right there is exactly what they did. But let me know what you guys think. It's been your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.